It was a quiet night in a small town in Texas. Mark and Elena had just moved into their new house with their 10-year-old daughter, Sophie. The house stood away from the main road, surrounded by fields and patches of trees. Life was peaceful, almost too peaceful, until the third night after they arrived. It was close to midnight when a loud knock echoed at the front door. Mark got up, thinking maybe a neighbor needed help. But when he opened the door, what he saw froze him. 2 children were standing on the porch, a boy and a girl, both around 12. Their clothes looked old, and their skin was pale as if they had not seen sunlight for weeks. The boy looked up and spoke in a flat voice. "Please, let us in. We need to use your phone." Mark's eyes adjusted to the dim porch light, and that was when he saw it. Their eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, nothing. Just endless darkness. His stomach tightened. Something about them was terribly wrong. Elena came to the door and immediately whispered, "Close it. Don't let them in." The children did not move. They just stood there, repeating in the same monotone, "Please, let us in. We can't come in unless you say yes." The dog started barking wildly from the backyard, but suddenly his bark cut off, as if someone had pressed mute. Silence fell, except for the knocking that started again, slow and deliberate, each thud shaking the wooden door. Mark shut it and locked it, and for the rest of the night the knocking echoed in their ears. The following night, it was worse. Sophie woke up screaming. When Elena rushed into her room, she found the curtains drawn back and Sophie pointing at the window. Through the glass, those same 2 children stood smiling up at her. Their teeth looked too sharp, too perfect, and their black eyes glistened in the moonlight. Elena yanked the curtain shut and held Sophie tightly, whispering prayers until morning finally came. Mark decided to call the police, but every time he dialed 911, the line only filled with static. No voices, no operator, nothing. That night, the power flickered, lights dimming and buzzing. Then the front door creaked open on its own. Slowly, inch by inch, it swung wide as if pulled by invisible hands. Mark grabbed a flashlight, his hands shaking. When the beam lit up the doorway, the children were already inside. This time their voices were colder, emptier. "You should not have denied us," they said together. "Now we are inside already." The temperature dropped so low that breath turned to mist. Elena collapsed on the floor, unconscious, while Sophie's scream pierced the house. Mark ran toward her, but the hallway stretched unnaturally long, like the house itself was twisting. The children moved closer, their eyes darker than night, their pale faces grinning. And then, everything went silent. The next morning, when neighbors noticed the door left open, they called the police. Officers searched the house but found no sign of Mark, Elena, or Sophie. The rooms were empty, the furniture undisturbed. On the dining table sat only one thing: Sophie's favorite teddy bear. One of its button eyes was missing, and in its place was a black, empty void, deep as the children's eyes. Locals still whisper that if you are driving along the lonely highways of Texas late at night, you may hear a knock on your window or a voice asking for help. They will look like lost children, innocent and pale. But if you let them in, you will never see the morning again. In a small town in Ohio, there stood an old steel bridge that people whispered about in hushed tones. By day, it looked like nothing more than a rusting piece of history, but by night it was something else entirely. They called it the Screaming Bridge. Locals swore that 3 teenagers had died there decades ago, and at midnight, their screams still echoed through the beams of metal and over the dark water below. Most people avoided it, but some dared to cross. Some made it through, shaken, but alive. Others were never seen again. Jake was the kind of person who laughed at ghost stories. His girlfriend Emily, on the other hand, was cautious. But when Jake decided to take his car across the bridge to prove there was nothing to fear, Emily found herself sitting in the passenger seat, clutching her phone nervously. On speaker, their friend Mark's voice warned them, "Don't stop the car. Whatever happens, don't roll down the windows if you hear anything. Just drive." Jake laughed. "It's just an old bridge, man. We'll record it, upload it, and prove everyone wrong." They reached the entrance around 11:45 p.m. The night was silent, too silent. The insects that usually chirped in the dark had gone quiet. Emily's voice trembled. "Jake, why does it feel like everything just stopped?" Jake smirked but gripped the wheel a little tighter. The headlights cut across the rusted beams as they rolled onto the bridge. The air felt colder. Halfway across, the car radio suddenly crackled on. Static filled the air, and underneath it came faint screams, long, drawn-out, desperate cries. Emily covered her ears. "That's not the radio, Jake. That's real." Before he could answer, the car jolted violently, and the engine died. The headlights flickered, leaving them in near darkness. Jake cursed, turning the key again and again, but the car wouldn't start. A white mist began to seep through the cracks of the windows, filling the car. The glass fogged over. Then, slowly, 3 bloody handprints pressed against the windows from the outside. Emily screamed, "Jake, someone's out there." A whisper drifted in through the static and the mist. "Help us, drive us home, or you'll never leave." Jake froze, but Emily turned toward the back seat. Her face went pale. Sitting there was a teenage girl. Her skin was pale as paper, her hair wet and clinging to her face. Her eyes hollow and black. She leaned forward, her voice layered with echoes, as if 3 voices spoke at once. "Drive us home." Jake stammered, "What do you want?" The girl tilted her head and leaned closer to Emily's ear. The air grew so cold, their breath smoked in front of them. "We want your life," she whispered. The bridge shook violently, metal groaning and clanging as though it would collapse. The car horn blared on its own. The screams grew louder, coming from every direction at once. Jake twisted the key again with all his strength. The engine roared to life. He slammed his foot down on the accelerator, tires screeching, the car shooting forward. The girl's black eyes watched him in the rearview mirror, a faint smile curling across her face as they sped off the bridge. The moment they crossed, everything stopped. The radio went silent. The mist vanished. The sound of crickets returned as if nothing had happened. Emily began to sob with relief. "It's over, Jake. It's finally over." But then her voice dropped to a whisper. "Jake, look in the mirror." His hands tightened on the wheel. Slowly, he lifted his eyes to the rear view. Sitting in the back seat were 3 teenagers, silent and motionless, staring at him with lifeless black eyes. The road stretched on into the night. The car's headlights cut through the dark, and behind them, no one knew what happened next. Some say the car was found the next morning, engine still running but completely empty. Others say Jake and Emily drove home, but were never quite the same again. One thing everyone agrees on: if you ever find yourself near the screaming bridge at midnight and you hear a cry in the distance, Don't stop. Don't listen, because it might not be an echo. It might be them waiting for a ride home. It was a cold night in a small town in Pennsylvania. The streets were empty, the trees barely moved in the still air, and the old railway tracks stretched into the woods like scars of another time. Nobody used them anymore. The station had been shut down decades ago, and the trains that once connected towns had long been forgotten, but people still whispered about it. The train that was said to appear at 1:00 in the morning. They called it the train that never stops. Ethan was 17, stubborn, and loved to prove people wrong. His friends laughed at him when he said he wasn't afraid of the stories, so he decided to do it. He took his bike, a flashlight, and his phone, and rode out to the abandoned tracks just before midnight. He told himself it was just a dare, just a game, and that he'd be back before anyone knew he was gone. The place was silent when he got there. The rails were rusted, the old wooden ties covered in weeds. The forest pressed close on either side, and every sound carried in the stillness. He checked his phone. It was 10 minutes to 1. He sat down on the tracks, shining his flashlight into the distance. Nothing but fog and trees. His heart beat faster with every passing minute, and though he tried to laugh at himself, the silence pressed heavier on him than he expected. When the clock turned 1, the wind suddenly picked up. It wasn't a normal wind. It came with a vibration under his feet, a low metallic hum that rattled the rails. Ethan froze. In the distance, he heard it. A whistle. Long, drawn out, mournful. The sound of a train. He held up his flashlight, but there was nothing yet. The vibration grew stronger. The whistle came again, louder this time. Then, through the fog, 2 blinding yellow lights pierced the night. A black steam engine appeared, larger than anything he had ever seen, gliding along the rails without any sound of wheels. The iron body gleamed wet and dark, and its chimney poured smoke that vanished into the fog. But the worst were the windows. Dozens of pale faces pressed against the glass. Some were gray, some shriveled, some so old they barely looked human anymore, and every single one of them stared directly at him, not blinking, not moving, just watching. A black steam engine appeared, larger than anything he had ever seen, gliding along the rails without any sound of wheels. The iron body gleamed wet and dark, and its chimney poured smoke that vanished into the fog. But the worst were the windows. Dozens of pale faces pressed against the glass. Some were gray, some shriveled, some so old they barely looked human anymore, and every single one of them stared directly at him, not blinking, not moving, just watching. The train slowed and stopped right in front of him. His phone shut off in his hand, as though the battery had been drained dry. The air smelled of rust and something far worse, like damp earth mixed with rot. Then, with a screech that made his blood turn cold, the door of the nearest carriage opened. A conductor stepped out. He wore an old black uniform, the kind people hadn't worn in over a century. His hat was tilted low and his face was pale. When he looked up, Ethan saw his eyes. They were completely black, no whites, no pupils, just endless darkness. The conductor raised one gloved hand and beckoned him forward. His voice was low, hollow, and it rolled across the tracks like an echo from the grave. All aboard. Ethan's legs trembled. Every part of him screamed to run, to turn back, to leave his bike and sprint home. but something about those voices inside the train kept him frozen. He could hear them now, whispers leaking out of the windows. Stay with us, ride forever. The passengers weren't speaking in unison, but the words blended into one terrible chant. He took one step forward, then another. His flashlight fell to the ground. The conductor smiled, a cold, lifeless smile, and moved aside, giving him space to enter. Ethan climbed the steps and stepped into the carriage. The air inside was colder than ice. Rows of passengers sat silently, their heads turning toward him all at once. They looked like corpses, dressed in old clothes from different eras. Some wore ragged suits from the 1800s, others torn dresses, others prison uniforms. Their lips barely moved, but all of them whispered the same words. Stay with us. The door slammed shut behind him. The next morning, the people of the town found Ethan's bike lying by the track. His flashlight was broken, his phone completely dead, as though burned from the inside. They searched the woods for days, but Ethan was never seen again. Some say the train still passes every night at 1, and if you look closely at the windows as it glides through the fog, you'll see a new face staring out, a young boy, eyes wide with fear, trapped forever on a train that never stops.